Okie. So here's the deal. This is the video I'm making just for those wonderful people that are going to be gone on Wednesday, January 19th. This is a quick how do you do, get you some stuff to go, work on some stuff for me. You have some questions to answer. I'm going to get to those in just a minute. Let's get to some other things. So you have some assignments. You had the essay that was due last week. If you haven't turned that in, get it to me as soon as possible because it's losing points literally every day that it's not in my inbox or in my hand to grade. You also have a study guide that's online, Google Classroom. All the stuff is on Google Classroom, by the way. A political cartoon project that's going to be coming up. Notes quiz, which is this week on Friday, and a test that's next week. You also have another paper that's coming up in about a week and a half, 2 weeks and a half. And that stuff I will be giving out after our test next week. So I'll give you a test next week. Next Thursday to be exact, and then I'm going to give you the next project or the next paper next Thursday. Check announcements. Google Classroom. So it has everything you need. It has the project that's coming up next week. It's the political cartoon project. It has materials to prepare for the next test. It has just a bunch of stuff, so use it. I beg of you. Let's get to what we're doing today. So I'm going to teach you some stuff I'm talking about in class today, and then you are going to answer several questions that are on the email that I just sent out. Some of the things, though, you're going to have to do your own research on. That's kind of the criteria is you have to do a little bit of work on your own. But I'm going to answer some of the questions here right now on this video. So first, treatment of women throughout history. We're going to get into like the history of treatment of women, not specific women. I'm going to have a lecture on that on Thursday and a little bit maybe on this Wednesday, but mostly on Thursday, which I'll be producing another video for you guys anyway. So anyway, treatment of women. The human species, as we know of through archaeological evidence, has been around for about 200 to 300,000 years. And we have found with archaeological evidence, the treatment of women has not been the best, to put it lightly. The first recorded human civilization was around 3,000, 4,000 BCE. And the birth of America doesn't take place until 1776 AD. And you won't see a congregation of women that pushes for women's rights until about 1848, which is before the Civil War. And you don't actually see women have the right to vote until 1919 AD, which is many years after America becomes a country and thousands of years since the first civilization was ever constructed by man. And this treatment of women goes for a variety of different places. There's a thing called the bride price, where men would pay the fathers of a daughter that is being married, sometimes married beyond their will. A lot of times they didn't have choices to be married, especially in the ancient world. I apologize. Women also in ancient societies were sometimes disregarded. Girls were disregarded. Baby girls were left out to be killed by the elements and exposure. Literally, babies were taken from moms and then brought into the wilderness to let them die. The Greeks did this. The Romans did this. Even the Egyptians had practices where they would leave baby girls outside just to die from the elements and to be eaten by other predators, or just die of starvation or dehydration or other things. So women weren't not seen highly in many societies over time. Many women's societies or women in societies that are more not ancient times, or even in the Middle Ages, even to modern times, have been seen mistreated. In the Middle Ages, there was this device called the Scold's Bridle. And the Scold's Bridle, which you can see this little picture here, looks like this. It's a metal device that would be put on the face of a woman. How this was put on them was by the choice of a husband. Basically, they could take a woman, their wife, and if they were talking bad about them, if the wife was annoying the husband, they could go to town, get this from the local magistrate, and they could have their wife wear this, and they would drag them around town with a little bell going off at the top of their head. It's a really uncomfortable device. Basically, it's a metal encased mask that goes all the way around the head, has a bell on top. It covers most of the eyes. It has a chain that's connected to the collar. They have a collar. They get dragged around like a dog. This was a mistreatment that was seen by women in the Middle Ages. Also, women were married off. I talked about this before with bride's price, but in some cases they were actually taken from local tribes all the way up to the 1700s. in 1800s in certain areas of the world to be the unwanting brides of another man in a different tribe for a long time. We're going to talk about life expectancy a little bit, but you are going to look up some information on your own. So life expectancy of men versus women. Actually, women actually live longer than men in society, our society. Women live to approximate age of 81 on average, while men live to 76. And there's many different reasons that factor into this, but that's one thing to keep in mind. I do want you to look up some statistics, though, and you're going to do this on your own, and you're going to send it to me in one of the questions that are given. I want you to look up the suicide rates between men and women, and there's a reason for this that we're going to talk about in class later. And I want you to look at a couple different things. The straight suicide rate between men and women, like who statistically speaking is more likely to kill themselves, men or women. And then I want you to look at the percentage-wise of attempts, because attempts and actually going through are two different things, because I want you to look at who, statistically speaking, is more likely to kill themselves, men or women, and who is, statistically speaking, more likely to attempt to kill themselves, men versus women. Give me those statistics inside the email that you will send with all the questions or the answers to these questions. Labor force. Women in the labor force has grown. The percentage of women in the labor force has grown dramatically after World War II, if you start the clock there. Before then, it was extremely small. A very limited number percentage of women were actually in the labor force before World War II. There were some. I mean, there was some that we talked about, the Triangle Strip Factory fire that took place that mostly women worked in. But when we talk about the full labor force, it was significantly smaller. It has grown dramatically over time, especially if you look at statistics today. One thing I want you to look up is kind of a two-part question. One, is there a gender pay gap? What that means is there a pay difference for the average woman in society versus the average man in our society? And if there is a gender pay gap, what is the percentage? In other words, what percentage are women getting paid less than men in jobs in America? And then I want you to kind of like formulate an idea of why this is, because there are logistical reasons why this is, and there's also reasons that we could talk about of why this is happening. College statistics, women with the college degrees have increased dramatically since 1970 and on. 1970 and before that, men were the predominant people that were earning associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and doctorates. By 1980s, you have women that will actually be 54%, that they just passed the halfway mark and getting more associate's degrees than men. Now, associate's degrees are the lowest degree that you can possibly get, and then they still were behind men in bachelor's, master's, and doctorate, and they will stay behind men in doctorates all the way up until the 2010s. And now in 2010s, women are actually seen to get more doctorates than men. So you see this change in relatively recent history about women getting more and more degrees higher than men. It's just taking a lot longer than men have had since the beginning. Another statistic to look at is the idea of men and women being single parents. You really can't tell, but this graph gives you a little bit of an estimate. The lighter color on the bottom, that's the percentage of women being single parents, and the darker color on the top there, that is men being single parents. And that actually factors a little bit into the idea of women's making money outside the house versus men, and the pay gap a little bit. So with all that said, let's get into some other facts that I want you to look into after looking at the percentage of pay gap. I want you to look at representation, because women have been represented in society by the government significantly less than men since the beginning of our country. As far as governors go, since this data has been compiled, this is the data, you can kind of see it. This is the number of governors that were women. Governors are basically the leading executive of each state. We have 50 states, we have 50 governors. We have only had, in the history of our country, 45 different women that have served as governors of these states. You're like, that's good, 45, that's only like 5 states missing. No. Governors are elected out. They only have terms of office, they can get elected out. And we've had thousands of governors or in our country's history, and I don't know the exact number, but you got to think Illinois has had several governors in the last 2 decades, and that's just one state. and you take that with all 50 states. Over the course of the entire history of our country, you've only had 45 different women in the history of our country, and they didn't really start until the 1970s. As you see with this chart here, it shows a list of women. You do have a couple outliers over here, but generally most of them start in the 1970s over here that have been women, and only 45 total. What you're going to do as one of the questions is you're going to look at the percentage of men to women in the United States Senate. So I'm looking for a percentage. How many women and how many men are in the United States Senate? It's only a total of 100 senators. How many men, how many women in the Senate? And then you're going to look at how many men and women are in the House. So you're going to look at both of them, and you're going to put that percentages in the question. So it's a little bit of a research for yourself. The next two questions on your sheet have to do with if I say the word girl specifically. If I say throw like a girl, run like a girl, or hit like a girl, what in our society, what is that meant as? If you tell somebody you hit like a girl, in our society, as a whole, as a general rule, what is that used as? Now, I want you to write that in for the question that I have on the sheet below in your email. But I also want you to look at the idea of if it's used like that by saying you hit like a girl, the meaning that we use that for, what does that tell you about how we view the word girl in society compared to boy? And write your descriptions of both of those, what it means in our society as a whole, and what does that tell you about our society and how we look at women in our society. And you write that in the answers. Make sure you email me the answers to these questions by the end of the hour. Tomorrow I will shoot out another email probably because I care. And I will send that to you probably tomorrow after school-ish. And then you guys will have the material for Thursday, but this is for Wednesday of this week. And then Friday we'll go from there. So, all right, peace out.